You are now listening to the Going North podcast with your host, author and speaker, Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, you're going to hear the voice of a different author share their stories, expertise, and their struggles that they had to overcome in life to leave you inspired to get more out of your life. Be sure to not only listen to this episode, but share with others, connect with the authors, and always advance others to advance yourself. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Going North podcast, we bring you some ordinary humans doing extraordinary things. Today is no different. A quote by Benjamin Franklin mentions how writing leads to wealth. Well, today, our guest is a retired colonel from the U.S. Air Force that teaches you how to write concisely with precision and focus through her award-winning book, Write to Influence. Let's welcome the courageous Carla Bass to the Going North podcast.
And I thank you for the opportunity to spend time with you and your listeners.
Good. It's great to have you on, Carla. How you feeling?
Outstanding. Top of the world.
Yes, ma'am, indeed, on top of the world, indeed. So it's wonderful to have you on, especially a veteran in the Air Force and a retired colonel, no less. So you definitely are a champion in more ways than one.
Well, thank you.
That's right. Thanks a ton for your service. Appreciate it. All right, am I filling in some things I may have missed during the introduction, and let us know who exactly is the wonderful Carla Bass.
Who is she? Well,
yeah.
she's a complex person. She's 63 and thinks like she's 34. She thinks every single day is a blessing. And I have, Oprah talks about follow your heart songs. Here's a good answer to your question. Well, I've been blessed with 2 heart songs. Doubly blessed, actually. I mean, most people are lucky if they've got one. My first heart song was to join the Air Force, and I decided to do that when I was in 7th grade, and not only Air Force, but Air Force intelligence. So I set my sights early. That was my heart song, and I served 30 years active duty, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. The second heart song actually resulted from the first, and that is now my passion to write, but more importantly to teach other people how to write powerfully. And there's a great, great story on how this came to be. You want to hear it?
Of course.
Of course. Okay, so the way this occurred, I was a lieutenant colonel at the time, and I had been selected as a squadron commander, which was a huge honor. I was in charge of 480 wonderful Air Force troops in Hawaii. When I arrived, it was the most losing unit on the island for professional quarterly and annual awards. These were really important accolades that would help the young troops get promoted early, get them pay raises. These were very important awards. And what I realized is it's not that my guys and gals didn't deserve to win. The problem was that their bosses couldn't write their way out of a paper bag. The bosses couldn't write winning packages to tell the award boards how wonderful these troops were performing. So if they didn't get the advanced promotions, they didn't get the pay raises, they couldn't send their kids to college, all because some person one level up couldn't write. And I thought, whoops. So I had to take care of that. So I took 3 days personal vacation, and I sequestered myself in a beach cabin, and I analyzed my writing because I had learned in a previous assignment that whatever it is I do works. So I asked myself a couple questions. Carla, what do you do? How do you write like that? Well, how do you make that happen, and how can you teach others? And out of that 3 days sequestration came this little tiny handbook. And my concept, which I call, and I still do, it's part 2 of the latest edition of Write to Influence, but I developed my methodology called word sculpting. So I took that little tiny handbook and I taught my 480 troops to write, and we started sweeping the awards. I mean, we won them all the time. And the other units came and said, okay, Colonel Bass, can you teach us too? And of course I did. And what really boggled my mind, because all I really cared about then were my family, my 480 guys, I ended up teaching my writing techniques for the next 15 years to thousands of Air Force people. Wherever I went, whatever job I had, the little word sculpting methodology came with me. So not only was I able to change people's lives by opening doors to opportunity by teaching people how to write, it changed my life too. I had no idea that it was going to take a 90-degree pivot. I had no idea I was going to write one book that won all these awards, much less a second edition. And that's how Heart Song 1 led directly into Heart Song number 2. True story with zero exaggerations.
Ah, so complex and courageous. And a champion, no doubt, taking over 430 folks to the top of the writing mountain. That's what I'm talking about.
Not courageous, just cares a lot about her people.
Even better. That's right, because caring is sharing, and you actually did do the sharing so much that you actually took this outside of retiring and you published this wonderful award-winning book known as Right to Influence. Am I telling us a bit more about the wonderful Right to Influence book?
Sure. I have two battle cries that came out of all of this. The first one is what I learned at the 324th Intelligence Squadron, where my journey began. The first one is that powerful writing changes lives, because it does. You could be the best qualified for whatever the career opportunity is, or the scholarship or fellowship. I mean, hands down, you could be the best. But if somebody else writes a better package than you can, guess who wins? So, and the second battle cry is that powerful writing is fundamental to successful businesses. And so what Right to Influence does, especially the second edition now, there's 4 parts to it. The first part gives strategies on here's how you formulate a winning argument, whether you're trying to submit a bid for a contract, or if you're trying to write a grant for a submission, whatever it is that you're trying to convince the reader that you were right. The first quarter of the book talks about here's how you strategize your argument. And then the second part of the book says, now that you've got yourself a draft, here's how you apply those word sculpting tools so that you chisel out all those wasted words, you get rid of the redundancies, you get rid of words that hog space. And I can play a game with you in a second if you want to engage. But it teaches you how to hone the text so that it's concise and powerful and potent. And then the next part of the book takes both of those strategies, the strategies and the word sculpting tools, and it talks specifically about applying those things to grant submissions, to the essay for college applications, to resumes, to elevator speeches, and several other products, how to give a powerful briefing. And then the last part of the book is there are 200 exercises that I've written in the format of before. Here, in other words, here's a horrible piece of writing. After, here's how we've transformed that horrible into hard-hitting, concise, and focused. And then analysis, so you can see how we transformed the pumpkin into the crystal carriage. And that's Right to Influence. And it's not a boring, stuffy textbook, but it's done lighthearted. I talk about Rumpelstiltskin and Goldilocks and garden gates and hard-boiled eggs. So the book talks to you just like I'm speaking to you now, just like a good friend.
Yeah, and that's definitely what we need nowadays, especially in 2019, where it's like you get the classic English books and textbooks, and it's like, all right, you want to just hit your head with it and go to sleep with it. But it's good that you didn't take that route with it and actually make it more fun and concise for folks to actually pick up and grab and actually keep as a reference.
Oh, exactly. And the thing has gotten accolades from corporations and businessmen and government agencies, but I think the compliment that I am most proud of, and that's hard to say because it's gotten so many, but it was from Emily. And Emily is a college student someplace. It was an Amazon comment. She says, "This book helped me pass, or actually excel, in my college classes that required composition. But the part that brought me such satisfaction," she says, "I like this so much better than the textbooks." And that that's the kind of wind behind the sails that keeps me going. Something else that the book helps with is email. We're all, whether it's personal email or professional email, we're all so encumbered by that form of communication, and we send an email to someone, and sometimes they don't read the whole thing. If you ask 2 questions or 3 questions, they'll come back and they'll only have responded to 1. So I have a chapter in there on email. Here's how you write effective email that's going to get read. And I've got Baker's Dozen. There's a Baker's Dozen collection in the new edition. So there's 13 tips each that I provide on. Here's 13 tips for effective email, for resume. Here are 13 tips for when your boss says, "It's time for me to do your annual performance review. Can you please give me some input?" People hate that. So I've got 13 Baker's Dozens tips on how to take the sting out of that onerous task. So there's a little bit of something for everybody in this crazy book.
And it's good that you did that, especially with the email thing, because some folks, they either write an email that's so darn long, and you're like, nope. You get dizzy, especially if you read on a smartphone, and then some folks, they write the email on their smartphone, and then there's so many darn typos on it, and everybody's the expert.
Oh, yep.
It's not their own work.
Yep. The first thing I tell people when you're trying to write an email is, and this is one of the word sculpting techniques also, is don't put the horse before the cart. If you have an actual point you're trying to make in the email or whatever the correspondence is, get the point up front. And then you can follow it up with the ancillary thank yous and blah, 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 blah. But if you open the email with "thank you very much for it," and you rattle on and on and on, then you get to the real point is down at the bottom, people aren't going to get to it. I tell folks that the most effective conversation killer in an email is the word "thank you." So I open an email, if it says "thank you," my initial reaction is to respond "you're welcome" and hit the delete button and move onward. So if you have something that you need to say, get it. People are busy. Oh, that's another point I wanted to share with folks. One of my principles in the book is that here, imagine a white rectangle. And that rectangle is about 1 inch wide and maybe an inch tall and 5 inches wide. So you have that in your mind?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, white rectangle. All right. That equals opportunity. Now put the word opportunity in big black letters. And the point here is that every writer, no matter what you're doing, is constrained by 2 things. You're constrained by time. I'm busy. You're busy. Tick, tick, tick. What do you need? What do you want to tell me? So you're constrained by time, and you're constrained by space. So example of the space, a web page, the above the fold area on a web page is space constrained. There are forms where there's actually a demarcated area on the form where you have only that much space allocated to whatever you're going to communicate. Sometimes grants are limited in the space that you can use to make your case. Describe your product in 25 words or less. So the person who can leverage the reader's time and the available space the best wins. So that little white rectangle is opportunity, and that's something else that I teach, how to leverage that time and space.
Very beautiful right there, and so true. Oh, that's real funny there. It was like, starting the email off with thank you, and then it's like, oh, you're welcome, delete.
I'm busy. Make your point. What do you need? Well, how can I help you?
It's like, what do you want? I don't know what you want. Get out of here.
You know, here, try this. Remember the old knock-knock jokes? Okay,
Oh, yeah.
So, all right, so in my world, here it is. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Wrong answer. Because in the world that I'm trying to share with people, it's knock, knock, not who's there, but knock, knock. What do you want? I'm busy. Knock, knock, who's there? Tick, tick, the clock is ticking. What do you want? How can I help you? Tick, tick. So concise, precise, get to the point, get off the stage. Thank you so much. But that helps you help yourself and help other people.
Yeah, it's true, and a lot of folks, I guess, in personal ways, sometimes they kind of can be kind of scared to be a little direct like that, because a lot of folks can be in emotion, but there's like a way to do that and not actually.
Well, and it's not being rude. Actually, people would appreciate it. I mean, in the workshop, I love teaching this in workshops. Though I teach workshops to, all sorts of folks, to government agencies, to corporations and public libraries, to high school kids, all the way up to sage professionals. But one of the examples, one of the exercises that I use is it was based on a real product. Done by a real sweetheart of a millennial, a wonderful young lady who was she was kind of new to the government business, and so it was a thank you note to someone who had helped out with a conference. But the thank you note was basically, "Dear Mr. Smith, thank you, blah 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 blah," and she repeated herself about 6 different times, saying thank you in about 5 different ways, and it was because she was being so genteel and so nice and so humble, but that made for an absolutely atrocious letter. So if you're in a professional world and you're trying to write concisely, I shrunk it by about 75%, and still it was nice, it was cool, it was professional, it was calm, and boom, mission accomplished. But so there's you don't have to be wordy and rambly to be nice. You can be nice and be efficient and effective, and readers actually appreciate that.
Amen to that indeed. And that's the beautiful thing about that. And you help folks to do that without trying to use emojis or extremely off-the-wall acronyms that people have no idea what they mean. It's like beyond bureaucracy acronyms. It's like like the BRB and probably TRT, whatever that means.
Mm-hmm. In the book, I have now the dirty dozen, I call them, the most common errors in writing, professional or otherwise. And I'll give you one of the top 3.
Oh, of course.
Top
Let's make
3.
the triangle
Okay.
happen.
All righty. So the first one is failure to proofread. People either A, don't proofread at all, which I think is actually what happens, or B, they rely exclusively on the automated computer, automated proofreading tools, which do not catch all the mistakes. So for those listeners who do use them, that's fine, but don't use them exclusively. Rely on your own eyeballs to proof a product. And I recommend 2 things. One is proofing it from the bottom up so that you don't actually get caught in the story of what you're trying to communicate. That's very easy to do. I have to be careful myself of that pitfall. And the other is proof it once, looking for punctuation errors. Proof it a second time, looking for spelling errors, because if you proof it once, looking for all of the mistakes, it's easy to overlook something. The second big mistake, number 2 on my dirty dozen list, is the failure to plan your story ahead and outline. So remembering that everybody is constrained by time and space, you know the story that you want to tell, you know the beginning, you know the ending because it's your message. Figure out what the main points are. Come up with an outline. That's your roadmap. So you can it helps you make sure that you stay within the allocated space, the allocated time, and that you hit all the main points that you want to hit. And for longer papers, it makes sure that you don't accidentally include tangential information that has nothing to do with your point. It just kind of sounded cool, but because it has nothing to do with moving your message forward, it actually detracts from what you're trying to accomplish. So outlining is really critical. And number 3 I've got is lack of precision. Run-on sentences, gobbledygook writing, paragraphs that don't flow into each other. Those are just snags that bother the reader and hurt your case. So that's a couple of my dirty dozen most common errors in writing.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. It's pretty interesting right there, proofreading strategy, just proofreading for actual punctuation. That makes perfect sense. I mean, it gives you more of a focus, and heck, and I'm pretty sure that you actually save less time that way as opposed to looking for, everything.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's another game I play with the in the workshop. This is one of the word sculpting tools. I call it verbs are your friends, rely on them. What happens in business writing nowadays is people are somehow intimidated by a simple, straightforward verb. They smother it in bureaucratic blather, as I put it. So I'm gonna play ping pong with you now.
Sweet.
So here's one example. I'll give you the bureaucratic blather, and you tell me what the real verb is. Okay?
All right.
First one is be in attendance. What's the real verb there?
Attend.
Yep. Provide answers. What's the real verb?
Answer.
Make an inquiry. Give me that in one
Ask.
word. Yep. For the purpose of gaining.
Acquire.
To gain. For the purpose of gaining is to gain.
Yeah,
How about make progress?
Progress.
Exactly. So when I teach this, I tell people, imagine a hard-boiled egg. Now make that sucker 6 foot tall. And what you want to focus on is the yolk, because the yolk is the real verb. And all of that gobbledygook that surrounds it is the egg white. If you discard the egg white and you use the real verb, go straight to the yolk, that's a real easy way to tighten up the writing and save that critical space. Isn't that fun?
Heck yeah, fun on the bun. That's what I'm talking about. Is there going to be writing board games coming out soon?
Actually, I hadn't thought about that, but that's not a bad idea.
Heck yeah, that'll definitely give you an edge in terms of the writing field, because I'm not even sure that actually really exists. I mean, sure they got the Baron's word cards, but that's just flashcards of words, but a board game, right to influence.
Yeah, if I do that, I'll cut you in for a percentage of the profits. How's that?
Woohoo! Sounds like a plan. That's right.
Yeah, right now I'm focusing on well, I still work for the government, so I still write stuff that goes to the White House and Congress, and I just adore that. But I'm giving lots and lots of workshops. So I travel Monday to Denver for the Department of the Interior. Mid-July, I give a 2 full-day workshop to a corporate client in New York City. Later this month, then I go to St. Louis for the Department of Interior again. And then I have given lots and lots of workshops to nonprofit organizations, because everybody can benefit from being able to make a tighter, more concise, persuasive case for whatever their goals might be. And this stuff is fun. So I explain, especially to high school kids, how I don't want to write a paper. I said, think of writing like Mary Poppins, the element of fun and the sugar go down and all that stuff. So what I teach is that, first of all, writing is a scavenger hunt. And I say that because when you get that first draft, now you look through it sentence by sentence and you find the wasted words, the words that hog space, the redundancies. So it's a scavenger hunt because you find all those things like Easter eggs and you carve them out. Writing is like photography. because you start off with kind of a vague idea, but the more you get into it and the more you describe it and the more detail that you put, the picture comes into focus. And writing's like poker, because if you're trying to make a point or push a program or a policy or whatever, and you're competing against somebody else, if you can figure out what the competition is doing, and then write to how your program or idea is better than theirs, but be nice about it. We're talking a factual analysis. That's like poker. It's also like poker because to write effectively, you have to empathize with the reader. You got to figure out what is the reader wanting to hear from you. What does the reader need? So it's not like, hey, buy my book because it's a good book. It's I think I know what you need, and this is how I'm able to meet your needs. So it's that's why writing is also like playing poker. Is you have to strategize and figure out how best and what the right angle is to present your message. So writing is just a kick.
A game of poker. So I guess there's times you have to poke some eyes out in the way in this case, huh?
Mm-mm.
Dot the I's and cross the T's.
Yep, dot the I's, yep. Not poke them out, but dot those suckers. So what else do you want to know about the book?
Yeah, so I actually checked out one of your past interviews, and you mentioned that you're a hybrid author, and that's something that a lot of folks aren't familiar with, so mind going deeper into that?
Sure. I spent about a year. I was caught at a crossroads trying to decide, do I go for the traditional publishing route, or which means get an agent and then do the query packages and so forth and try to go for Wiley or Simon & Schuster or whomever, or self-publish. So I bought a book. The sucker is about 1.5 inches thick with no exaggeration, and I read that. That was my Bible. I dog-eared, underlined, and so forth. And what I learned there is if you go the self-publishing route, which is what I did, there are even alternatives within that. You can be completely self-published, where you're the one that has to decide the page types of paper, the margins, all of the mechanics of actually publishing the thing so you can hold it. But I was so busy I didn't want to do that. So I went hybrid. So I went with a wonderful company called Gatekeeper Press. I cannot sing their praises highly enough. So what Gatekeeper Press does for me is I develop the manuscript. I provide that to them as a Word document. Gatekeeper Press then turns that into that delicious paperback and various ebook formats, and they're my distributor. So Gatekeeper Press has the handshakes with Barnes and Noble and Amazon and Ingram, Sparks, and just a potload of other distributors. So I don't have to worry about that. There are two other tips that I picked from that. Here's how you self-publish, and I pass this to everybody. The first was hire a professional editor. And I will tell you, I write like this as part of my job. For 40 years I've written like this. My initial reaction was, why do I need an editor? Well, I'm so glad that I ate that humble crow and followed the advice, because it was brilliant. It cost me about $8,000 a book to have it professionally edited, but that is the best money ever spent. And if folks are interested in an editor's recommendation, I would be glad to pass the names on. The second part, well, Priscilla Duckworth was my editor. She's fabulous. The second piece of advice was hire a professional cover designer, as opposed to throw $5 off and get some alternatives from somebody out in Websnetville. So I hired a professional cover designer. So those three pieces led me to where I am now: the professional editor, the professional cover designer, and Gatekeeper Press. Those three constitute my team, and I would not be talking to you if it weren't for them.
Beautiful indeed. When you mentioned all the name, especially the Gatekeeper Press, like, their name is perfect. You get your book in Barnes & Noble and all these other places. Like, yeah, gatekeeping. All right, that's what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And love, heck, I listened to one of your past interviews, and you mentioned how through the hybrid publishing and all those folks you named, you're able to write and publish a book with gravitas, credibility, and staying power, which is definitely true because you're on your second edition. And how many awards you've won for it? What was it, 7, 10?
It's four. And then that was the first edition. So the second edition actually debuted. I debuted it at the American Library Association's big convention in D.C. last week, and it only hit Amazon about 4 days ago. So this second edition, I mean, we're talking brand spanking new. But I've already submitted it for 2 award competitions. But of course, the results for 2019 don't come out until 2020. So it's in there, and we'll just keep our fingers crossed and see what happens.
That's right. Don't worry. You're going to get the thumb. You're going to get the thumb. All 5 of them. That's right. Indeed. That's right, indeed. Well, I'm asking a question I like to ask every guest, and that is, if you're to wake up tomorrow with all of your knowledge and experience, and in your case, you're going back 9 years, and you were 25 in the current year of 2019, what advice would you give to yourself?
To myself? Oh, that's a very good question. The answer is, well, I'll go back with my mom's advice. I had to think about that for a second. That's a good question. She said, set your goals high, shoot for the stars, and go get them. Follow your dreams. No, not follow, it's pursue. Pursue your dreams with a passion. And the other thing she told me was, oh my God, I heard this so very often when I was a kid. There's no such word as can't. No such word as can't. And she's right. So if you have a dream, if you have a passion, there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be some days where you say, I'm just so friggin' tired. But if it's in your soul, go for it. You know, every now and then I get tired, but every now and then when I mention that, there's this magical gust of wind that comes behind me, whether it's an unexpected email from someone from the past who says, Colonel Bass, if it weren't for, I wouldn't have, or some unexpected accolade, or like that review from Emily, where people actually appreciate what you're doing. You get your reinforcements that you're actually helping people. So, just stay the course. Chin up, look straight ahead, and keep on marching.
Woohoo! Straight from the mouth of the Colonel, baby. That's what I'm talking about. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Keep that chin up. Keep it going north. And make sure you take a quill pen with you, too, in this case. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, definitely going to put all the stuff to where we can find you in the show notes. What's the best way for folks to reach out to you?
Sure. My website is www.write2influence.net. Just straight, write2influence.net. And my email is similar. It's Carla, CARLA, at write2influence.net. And I welcome input from anybody. If your reviewers or your listeners, I'm sorry, I'm getting tired, happen to buy the book, I would really appreciate reviews. That helps so very much. If anybody wants workshops, give a holler. Public libraries, I work so very closely with them. If I haven't been to a public library, get your librarians to reach out to me. And the workshops that I give to them generally are either on resumes or writing grant submissions or the essay for college applications, or just a straight-up word sculpting, the fundamentals. And for the libraries, those are only hour-long sessions. And these are interactive. I don't stand up and lecture at you for an hour. There's a lot of ping-pong, like you and I were playing the verb game. Lots of ping-pong in these workshops that I teach. They're actually a lot of fun. But that's how people can get in touch with me.
Sweet. Well, there you have it, folks. Going out there and pick up both editions of the book just for the fun and the bun goodness. The first edition and the second edition of Right to Influence, baby. And put your writing game on fleek, as the youngsters like to say. You'll 10x your writing with this wonderful book indeed. Definitely going to pick up my copy of the book, and especially since it's so awesomely dark blue and gold too. So definitely pick up a copy of the book and leave a review.
Yep, that harkens back to my military roots. I did that on purpose. So the battle cry is powerful writing changes lives. It opens doors to opportunity. It truly, truly does.
Oh yeah. So any parting words for our wonderful listeners?
That's just it. This is something that every individual can control. Every person can learn how to write like this, and it truly does make a tremendous difference, especially for the kids in school, because they're generally not being taught this. So when they come out into the workforce, they write fat. They don't write skinny. Employers are looking for people that can write powerfully and concisely, and they're not getting this. So if any of your listeners have any sway at all with school boards or even have kids at home, this will help them. We're talking a lifelong skill here. If you learn how to do this now, it will pay dividends forever. That's my tap-off line.
Hey there, you superstar. Thanks a bunch for making it this far in the podcast. Hope you really enjoyed it. Heck, if you made it this far, that means you really enjoyed it. Be sure to shoot the guest an email or head over to the social media pages and leave them a nice response that you heard them on the Going North podcast, so that way they can continue to be inspired to do great things. And be sure to share this podcast with others that you think would enjoy it as well, because we want to inspire as many people as possible to live their dreams, embrace them, and to do something positive.